So, Wayfinder just hit early access on Steam, and I decided to bite the bullet and give it a shot. While there's lots of good, there are a few things that could potentially pose a threat to the future of the project. What's up guys, my name is Scorch, and today we're going to be going over my first impressions of Wayfinder, and talk about where the game might be going, and if it's going to get there at all. Before we begin, I just want to mention Wayfinder is in early access. If you want access to the game, you will have to give up a small sum of money and become a founder. I think this includes a few rewards when the game releases, so we'll see if it's worth it. Alright, getting into it. For those that might not be aware, the game is published by the same company that made Warframe, Digital Extremes. However, working on the project directly is a studio I've never heard of before called Airship Syndicate. They seem to have a handful of games under their belt, and they're keen to make an impression. So far for me, that impression has been, well, unpolished. You start the game with a cutscene establishing the premise in which the world is set. In short, the world has been overtaken by something called the Gloom, a mysterious and hostile force that aims to consume the world of Evernorth and break down reality into chaos. You, as a Wayfinder, are one of the few heroes left able to stop it. I'll elaborate more later on my opinions of the story and the way it's presented, but for now, let's just look at the general game loop. When you start, you have the choice of three Wayfinders, each with their own special abilities and weapons. However, it's important to note that each Wayfinder is not limited to a certain weapon type, and the game does not have any sort of class system, so to speak. You can pick any character and use any weapon, just make sure to pay attention to their abilities, as this is what will define your playstyle. As of right now, I would suggest picking someone with weapons you like, as to get anything different takes an absurd amount of time. I played for over 3 hours on stream and didn't pick up a single weapon crafting component, or a crafting component for another Wayfinder. So it seems, at least in its current state, if you want to try new weapons, you'd better be ready for a grind. Once you pick your starting Wayfinder, you are thrown into the world of Evernorth and immediately given a boatload of quests, which never seem to slow down. Personally, the quests just felt like chores, with each one consisting of a dialogue dump I couldn't really care to sit through, and somehow every time I finished smashing the spacebar, I'd have multiple quests active despite only following the main quest line, which I can see leaving younger players or new players even just a little confused. I was lucky enough to have a basic understanding of most of the systems thanks to my prior gaming knowledge, which is something I'm sure many players experienced. So I was less inclined to listen to the characters drone on, as I found no value in listening to what they had to say. I can go on about this, but for now we'll move on. The main objectives usually take place in the Gloom. Similar to Warframe, the game loads you into a procedurally generated tile set, with each new run giving you a different layout. I made a video a while ago going over my first impressions of Warframe, where I kind of explained this a little better. Feel free to go check that one out, by the way, when you're done here. Link in the description. This is a tried and tested way for consistent replayability, provided the other mechanics are good, of course. Before you enter the Gloom, you have the option to change the difficulty if you've done the quests to unlock it. You can also add things called imbuements, which can further increase the difficulty, sometimes offering rewards in exchange. I think this is actually a nice touch. Once inside, you're free to explore, find loot, fight enemies, and of course bosses. The game likes to call itself a roguelike, but personally I didn't feel this way. Maybe I just haven't played enough just yet, but to me it felt more like an RPG looter shooter with Souls-like elements, with the UI of, well, Fortnite Mobile. Speaking of the UI, now that we've gotten the general game loop out of the way, let's talk about some of the gripes I have with this game. We'll start with one of the big ones that seemingly is plaguing a lot of startup games lately: performance. It was astonishingly bad. I have an AM5 system with a 3070 Ti, which by no means is the latest and greatest, but should still be able to push this game's FPS into the hundreds, without breaking a sweat. However, this was not the case. I ended up having to cap the FPS to stop my encoder overloading in OBS, else the stream would just be very, very choppy. And no matter what I did, I couldn't stop this from happening during each instance of dialogue, making the viewing experience very uncomfortable, thus leading to my increased use of the spacebar.
Our works as Lord Hill before you once that's done.
On top of that, many people have been experiencing crashing, and a lot of people are seemingly complaining about the performance, so it's not just me. Next up, content, or rather the lack of. As mentioned, once you pick your Wayfinder, you are more or less stuck with them unless you want to fork out more real-world money. In order to craft new weapons, you need multiple components, seemingly found in the Gloom, but as I said, during my over 3 hours of gameplay, I didn't come across a single weapon crafting component or Wayfinder component, and from all the people I've talked to, it's a while before you will. Now, I can already tell I will be getting bored of this weapon long before I have the chance to try something new. I'm really hoping that as the game develops, they add more weapons to try while you grind for new Wayfinders. Else, I see people getting very bored very quickly. On top of that, the game to me felt kind of easy and anticlimactic. The only bosses I found hard was hard for the wrong reason. The boss itself was easy to kill, but once dead it would spawn really spongy ads that if they made it back to the body, he would just respawn with a quarter HP. This happened several times before it eventually just gave up and died. Furthermore, when I eventually encountered an instance deemed too high level for me, I went in anyway and mopped the floor with the enemies solo. Now as I say, I was able to work out the upgrade systems in the game fairly easily without needing the characters dumbing it down for me. However, having said that, the upgrades I was using didn't really have much of an impact. There was never a moment when I added something or just got done speccing my new weapon and felt a big jump in power. It all felt rather consistent. This was probably due to the game's level scaling, doing its best to keep things fair, but it leaves enemies always feeling pretty spongy. I really wanted to try some different weapons, but we all know that wasn't going to happen. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but overall I think the game exhibits a lack of polish and content. Airship Syndicate could really take a page out of DE's book when it comes to optimizing a game, as I could still see Wayfinder being successful as a mobile title as well as PC. With more weapons being available early on, I can see people lasting a lot longer before putting the game down and never to touch it again. Finally, I would love to see the story feel more involved. In my opinion, a good game developer makes an amazing story and an amazing world, and tries to create the mechanics around that to fit in and feel as though you're a part of that world. I'm not saying Airship Syndicate hasn't done this, but it feels like they designed the story around the mechanics of the game, not the other way around, making the story feel subpar and second to the actual gameplay itself, and not necessary to understand to play the game. With that out of the way, let's finish with some positives. The art style in this game is very pretty to me, with a style that feels timeless and appropriate for the premise. The world and characters are crafted with great detail. Everything looks like it belongs there. From what I've seen, there are a few enemy types in the game, but what's there is done fairly well. Each enemy moves and works differently, and combat for the time being is fun. Once you figure out your combos and how to move properly, it can be really satisfying to combo a group of enemies before dodging an attack at the last second, swinging around and popping them in the face. I'd also like to add I enjoyed how the crit system works, making it challenging to find the little crit points for some extra damage. Although they can be a little hard to spot at times. The instant levels are fun to explore with different paths sometimes leading to extra rewards, adding to that Souls-like feel. Overall, the game has a solid foundation that can be very much improved upon. I have faith in DE's choice to publish Wayfinder, but I won't lie, I'm very skeptical. The way the whole development process feels for this game kind of reminds me of another game that fell off the radar a while ago, but is actually kind of making a little bit of a reappearance? Review ? But with all that in mind, tell me what you guys think. Was there something I missed? Leave a comment down below and let's make some new friends. Or enemies. Just leave something for the algorithm, please. And maybe while you're at it, like and subscribe. Or check me out on Twitch. And with that said, I hope you homies enjoyed this video. Let's see where Wayfinder goes and see how it looks in a couple months after a few updates. Who knows? But till next time, I have been Scorch, and I will see you out there, homies.